Morning everybody. I'm Barbara Murphy, I'm manager of the Older People Services in Waterford, and my colleague is Sarah Neville, who is physio manager for community care in Waterford area. And we integrate across the board. I would integrate between the hospital and the community. And what we want to talk to you today is about our journey through, and we call ourselves Wake Up. And we joined up to provide health and social care for older adults with complex diseases. And what I plan to talk to you about is to bring you from the start of our journey, bring you right through to the governance. And we feel that we have a very strong governance within the Waterford Wake Up, and that we have a very integrated care between the acute and the community. I suppose our journey, in Waterford, we have what we call the hub. It had 3 consultants and a nurse. The acute service did service with OTs and physios, and during the hard times these were taken off. It wasn't seen as a priority, so they lost these parts. So there was a hunger there for us to start. In the community we were trying to provide what we could, but we were hungry to get pathways for older people out there. But it turned like every time I went into the hospital, all I heard about was delayed discharges, Choligars, and over 65s. And what are you doing about them, Barbara? You are not providing the beds, you're not doing this. And there was nothing. I was being clobbered the whole time. So my colleagues, like Sarah and our OT manager and the primary care lead manager, Susan, we went to meet the consultants. They were under the same impression as us. So we started to look at ways what we could do to provide further services. So we got together. I suppose there was other issues that created this. We had rehab issues where there were such shortages of medical doctors to look after it. I had this carrot that I would have to close rehab beds unless I got some way of moving people along. And they did close for 2 weeks. I was the big baddie in Waterford for a long time, but it happened in the summertime, so the beds were quite quiet, so I got away with it. But it brought people together, it got people thinking, and we got senior management on board. And then a big initial meeting was called, where we called everybody together from acute and from community care. And everybody was on the same page. You know, we all wanted the same goals, but where were we going to start from, or what we were going to do? Now, I suppose we were lucky. The general manager of the acute hospital of the day and the community care manager of the time, TJ Dunford, were actually on board with us. And TJ was very much on board about it and knew about the integrated care programmes. So he was very involved with it. So at that meeting, everybody decided that we needed somebody to go forward and to look at what we needed and how we would develop and how the business cases come forward. So the general manager in Waterford at the time actually released one of the consultants, and I suppose John Cook was named and he took it on board. And he met everybody singly. Everybody that was involved, community thing. He spent 6 weeks and then he wrote up the report, which proved that we needed something to develop to look after our older people in the Waterford and City area and the county. And we would have huge black spots in the county where people can't get to services, and we're still developing those and trying to think about how we would get them into clinics and trying to develop a clinic down near Waterford. But that is all part of the governance because we're all looking at this together. So John took that on, and there's no, as I said, there was no better person, because as he was talking to people singly, if they were sceptical at all, they weren't sceptical going out of his office. He was known to sell, he would be known to sell sand to the Arabs now. That's the way it should be. You were convinced that this is the way to go, and that was how it was. So at that stage, we had an ultimate goal that we all wanted, care pathways and how we wanted to do it. And even that sort of thing, people went away from that meeting saying, what can I do in my service with limited resources? And that, I think, was a great thing from us, because acute physio managers and community care, the acute OT and physio managers met with the physio managers from community care and OTs managers from community care. They got together and looked at how could they do something where before this wouldn't have happened. There wouldn't have been that collaboration. So that whole joining the forces for community and acute came together out of that initial meeting, and also from John meeting those people separately and explaining the way and what was their vision. And in the end, when you sit down with people on their own and they're working in these, yes, they will have frustrations because there's limited resources there, but in the end, everybody has a vision. Everybody has a vision for their service and what they want to gain. So if you are a physio manager, or, you know, John went to see the rehab teams, what was their vision for older people and how could they help out on these sort of things? You know, managers sitting in, if like he would have met with me, he would have met my general manager, the acute manager, the directors of nursing in both residential services and in the acute services. And we all had visions for older people, and it wasn't just about trolley cars and about delayed discharges, because I would always say that there isn't a quick fix for trolley cars and delayed discharges. That's a team working to try and get that together. But this isn't, just getting a clear pathway isn't going to prevent the trolley car. That isn't going to happen, and that would always be my way of thinking. I suppose then the governance came along and we had to, decisions had to be made. Who was going to be what? So John was automatically the co-lead. He was the project leader, and I was asked to be the co-leader, and I took it on very well, but I would be known as the troubleshooter. I find the stuff to be done, but my strong point would be to get the business cases done, to get the resources. And when we got the funding, that's the biggest thing. I suppose John thought he was going to have senior physios sitting in there in a month's time, but that wasn't going to happen. There was a reality there that takes a good length. But then we went off and we looked at how could we provide a service. So like we got the senior OT from the rehab to come and look at it, and we went off and got agency into our rehab. So we got approvals for different things like that to help us get started until we got the funding into it. So we now have a hub with the governance, which is, it's a huge thing in Waterford, and everybody talks about it. Like we have the hub that's active. We have a senior physio, we have a senior OT joining us soon, we have a social worker, and I suppose at the moment we knew everybody that was coming on board. Our CNS, it was the nurse in the post. I suppose getting the CNS was a huge thing, but trying to fight for the CNS to get backfilled by a nurse so that we wouldn't lose that resource was a big thing. So we fought for that. I fought with the director of nursing in the acute hospital to say that service is there, it has always been there, this is an extra service. If you don't do this, that is not helping, you're not coming on board, and you'll be named as the person that's going to be against us. So, and everybody knows what, but I've no problem naming them. So, and I suppose I have the the networking there from the acute and the community, and that makes the huge difference. And I think that that's what the governance is about. You need that networking. You need somebody that knows acute and community to keep the network together, to know where to go for help, where not to go for help. It's like bringing in the agency while you're waiting to get somebody in there, just to look at it. From the OT point of view, what we did was we brought in agency. Community paid for it, but the governance came from the acute sector until we got the senior. Those little things to work out how you think. You needed to sit down, and if it's the one thing within ICPOP is that we feel we have a very strong governance, and we feel that it's working. I suppose from our governance then, we were lucky enough that our sponsors became the acute manager. Richard Dooley agreed to be our sponsor, and Kate Killeen is the social care leader for the CHO5. They came on board for as sponsors. As I already said, John is the lead and I co-lead with him on the thing. And I suppose we are the communicators between national and the local. Like if people from the community want something, they'll ring me. The acutes will ring John. That's how it goes. Then our steering group, we've set up our steering group. And I must say, the first steering group meeting was unbelievable, because I think there was very few apologies. People were ringing me up afterwards to say, oh, I wasn't invited to the steering group, is there a problem? And I said, it's probably just, you were just left out because it was the first meeting. Well, I would really like to be there. When the primary care manager comes along and says, what can I do to be on the steering group? Well, I said, you are on it. No, I didn't get the invitation. Well, I said, you will get your personal invitation because we want you on it. When you see people like that fighting to come on it, we brought on CIT management, and about 2 weeks before the steering group, they said to me, we were so delighted to be invited. Like when you hear of CIT saying that to you, because they felt that they could help us in some way to develop things. You had the Director of Public Health Nursing coming on board. All these different people that we brought on, the local GP, it was wonderful to see, because usually GPs won't give the time to come to a meeting, but they came on board for it. And he was actually from the county and he came up, which was great to see that somebody wanted to represent their colleagues on board it. So our next thing is now that we're going down 4 subgroups from our steering group. Now our steering group is chaired by Dr. Mulcahy, one of the other consultants. So we're starting off now with 4 working groups in ambulatory care, which is going from the hub itself. We're going to have inpatient care, community care, and residential care and rehab. And the nominated chair people have been told, and they're sitting on it. Now I sit on the residential care and the rehab because it's part of mine, and we're developing our terms of references as we go along, and our first meeting has been thing. But I have people coming to me to say, I believe you've disbanded. We always would have had a rehab group. You've disbanded that, you're starting a different one. Can I be invited to it? So I think it's really good that people are wanting to come join us. They see the way that they're seeing clear pathways for older people. And I think that comes from a strong governance, that we're shown that we're trying to manage older people and to give them a voice out there in the community. And even nursing homes on our steering group, the nursing home person, but I suppose I would have a network with the nursing homes in Waterford. and different directors came up and said, I believe there's a steering group. And I said, well, I'm sorry, somebody's been picked. Oh yeah, but I just thought I might get on as well. I said, no, you're on something else. So we're trying to share it out. But I think that shows where if you really form that big strong links and network between the acutes and the community, and unless you actually network between both people, you'll never get anywhere. And anybody that's setting out on this journey, that is what you really need, is that network, and somebody there that will network with the people. You really have to be strong, you have to stand up and be counted and look out for older people, that everybody is on the same page. Okay, thank you very much.
She's a hard act to follow now. So, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, I suppose, a bit more about team formation and just getting started. I suppose Barbara has alluded to a lot of information there. You know, we're still very much in the early stages, so I suppose in giving a few pointers on getting started and what's worked quite well, and it's first of all, I suppose, just building on what's already in place. You know, there are a lot of informal pathways that we've had in place, and it's, you know, WICUP has given us the opportunity to actually start formalising those, such as referral pathways, etc. You know, from a physiotherapy perspective, where it's been very beneficial is that, you know, we've already have a falls programme in place. However, it allows us the opportunity to sit back, review it. We've looked at the capacity of the falls programme, the frequency of how we're running it, and the content, and looking at the various, you know, can we pitch it at different levels to meet the needs of the clients that would be coming out from the various clinics. So that's been very beneficial to us. I've done an early start, and as Barbara's already alluded to, we were very lucky from a physiotherapy perspective that once the funded post was approved, that we got approval to put an agency person into the system, so that we're allowed to free up a very senior staff member who was able to take on the physiotherapy role in the WICUP project. And I suppose this is very beneficial because it allowed us to, I suppose, be very much involved in the shaping of the clinics at an early stage. I suppose at an early stage we had nursing, the CNS was involved, and the physiotherapist. So and they were very experienced. I think that's very, very important. So I suppose the experience of these people, because they had huge knowledge of the acute and of a primary care service, and this was very, very invaluable from the outset. And I suppose, as we've sort of alluded to, we're very lucky now that we have more experienced posts coming in the relation of social workers and the occupational therapists. And all the staff that are very involved are very motivated and really want this to work, and that's very beneficial. Moving on to team formation. There have been, I suppose from the outset, and this will be very much getting feedback from the staff member that's working within WICUP, regular meetings, you know, starting first, they were on a fortnightly basis, very much looking at the operations, development of the clinics. Now they're much, obviously, shifting more towards discussion with clients, triaging referrals. And I suppose there's been huge buy-in, you know, everyone attends. The consultants attend, all the team members attend, the admin support. This allows, I suppose, the team to really come together on a regular basis, get to know each other, understand each other's roles, and it allows for that equal voice and contribution for all the team members, and I think that's been very, very key and important. And I think that therefore has led on to the flexibility of staff who are involved in the team to trial new ways of working. So say, for example, with having the CNS and the physiotherapist there at an early stage, you know, they're looking at, you know, starting up pre-assessment clinics, triaging clinics. You know, this is already in place for the movement disorder clinic, and that works very well. And I suppose they were set up really to look in an effort to reduce waiting times to access the services within the hub and to try and maintain the throughput. So that's something that's been tried at the moment and seems to be working well. A common base is obviously very beneficial for any team during development, and you know, space is obviously a challenge for WICUP. I think, you know, again, feedback from staff, you know, it's very much, you know, a lot of the informal team building that does happen outside the formal meetings. And I know from my therapist's perspective, the more time that she's able to spend on site and at the clinic is just really beneficial to allow for the joint working and all those informal important links to develop. just to give us sort of a brief insight into sort of how the physiotherapy role has developed within ICPOP. And that person has become very much a link person between the hub and primary care services. As I said before, a very experienced person knows the acute services inside and out, knows all the physiotherapy staff working in community and in primary care, and therefore it was very hard for any staff member in community to actually say no to her. So that really, really was key in the early stages to get buy-in from community staff, and I can't really reiterate that enough. It really was. So what we have spent a lot of time doing, and that's gathering a lot of pre-assessment information and using the information that we have at primary care level to feed into the clinic. So how are we doing that? So the senior physiotherapist in the clinic is getting the clinic lists in advance, cross-checking that against our community physiotherapy registers. If any client has been seen by a physiotherapist in the last 6 months, she's contacting that physio, asking them to do up a report. We have a template done up to feed into the clinic. It's a lot of work for primary care, there's no doubt about that. However, so far they're willing to do it, and because they can see the benefit of doing that. So, for example, offsetting an unnecessary re-referral to physiotherapy, which has often been the case in the past, where because there isn't that communication link, the person just gets referred back for physiotherapy. Also, we're allowed to feed in the important baseline information on that client. And it also assists maybe during the triaging to allow the team to decide where that client needs to go. Do they really need to get to the consultant clinic, or is it a pre-assessment clinic that will suit that client? We have used ICPOP as an opportunity to look at aligning and standardising our processes of assessment across primary care, social care, and we also would have acute physiotherapists working with us on that. The feedback, two-way feedback, I suppose the physiotherapist in the hub has been very much that feedback first and from the team out, the physiotherapist in. Again, because we're involved at a very early stage, we would be troubleshooting and triaging the early, or looking at the early sort of falls clinic forms and MDT information that was coming out to us. I suppose the primary care physiotherapist was able to look at the information that's coming on the referral. Was it matching the presentation of the client that's coming in? And getting that information right is very, very important, because I suppose at ICPOP what we're trying to do now with the falls clinic is getting the client, if deemed appropriate, straight from the falls clinic into a falls programme. So the information needs to be right to allow that process to happen. So lessons learned so far. I suppose this is key learning, I suppose, from my perspective. We're still very much in the early stages. I do believe that having the two project leads has been very beneficial. Both are extremely motivated and really want this to be a success, and you can see how passionate Barbara is about it. And they've always kept the client at the centre of the project and everything that we're trying to move forward and do. At the outset, community services was very much an unknown entity to the hospital-based elderly consultants. Community staff, rarely had the experience to work with hospital-based consultants, especially in Waterford. There's very, very little overlap. So obviously it did take time to build up trust, understanding, mutual respect. So I suppose what I would say is, in early stage meetings, I think what's very important is when you're leaving that meeting, check for meaning and check for meaning again. Things get lost in translation. People have competing priorities. And I know from my perspective at an early stage, when you don't have any extra resources and you really want to buy into something, the last thing I want to do is commit to something that I cannot deliver on. I think Barbara, being a sort of a community-based project lead, I think has been very, very helpful to us, I suppose, staff that are more based in community. I've definitely gone to her on many occasions to troubleshoot and get advice, and she's a really good understanding of the operational constraints that come with being a service manager in community, and that's so beneficial. I think we've also been extremely lucky that Dr. Cook, the elderly consultant project lead, was very willing to come out and talk to community staff, and that's been very, very beneficial. He came to one of our staff meetings, again talking to a lot of the staff working in primary care, and as Barbara already said, he's very good at selling the project, and that made a huge difference in getting primary care physiotherapy staff on board and being willing to feed into the project. So I suppose in conclusion, we're still very much in the early stages, it's still developing, and we're still learning as we go along, but it's been a very positive experience so far. And as the team is expanding, and as more and more staff and experienced staff join the team, I think the outcomes for clients in Waterford can only get better. Okay.